Welcome to the July the 28th taping of It Happened in Grand Prairie as we bring back the memories. And this is our history taping number 21. We are so excited that we have two wonderful guests with us today. Mr. and Mrs. Lester Ater, and that is A-T-E-R, and Mrs. Ater, the former Helen Dreckshaw. And Helen Dreckshaw Ater, we're just so glad to welcome you and Lester to the show today.
Well, thank you. We enjoy being here.
Wonderful. All right, now, I know that we're going to talk with Lester in a few minutes, Helen, because I believe he's a transplanted Grand Prairian, but we're proud of him nevertheless because, first of all, Lester, how long have you been in Grand Prairie, Texas?
A little over 40 years.
A little over 40 years. That doesn't make you a newcomer to Grand Prairie in any sense of the word, does it?
Not hardly.
All right. Lester, you came to Grand Prairie from what town or what area?
In California, I guess you can say there. I'm a transplanted Okie.
A transplanted Okie. You were born in Oklahoma and then went to California.
California.
And then came to Grand Prairie,
Grand
Texas.
Prairie.
Wonderful. All right, we're going to let you rest for a few minutes and get on with Helen because I believe Helen is a long-time resident of Grand Prairie. Helen, would you like to maybe tell us a little bit about your family genealogy, both on the Dreckshaw side of the family and your mother's side of the family that's very difficult for me to pronounce today. Tell us a little bit about your grandparents, where they came from coming to Grand Prairie, and then we want you to show and tell at least one of the pictures that you have of one of your grandmothers. Would you do that?
All righty. My mother's family came here from Pennsylvania.
All right.
And they're Pennsylvania Dutch. And they settled in around what is Wheatland. And my mother was born in what is called Highland Park now. And my father came from Illinois. His mother and daddy came from Germany. In fact, they were born in Germany. And they settled in Illinois. And then when he was 10 years old, they came and settled in the area, which is called Highland Park now.
All right. Could you give us the approximate dates that they came to the Dallas area in the 1840s or 50s or, and if you don't remember that, that's perfectly all right. Let's go on in then to your grandparents on your mother's side. Is that the one you have a photograph of?
No.
Is that your dad's?
This is it right here.
That's the one. All right, let's show that one.
Yeah, this is my Dreckshaw family.
All right, and if you would if the camera could get a close look of the clothes that they're wearing in that particular photograph, that is very, very significant, and that's back in the days when they had the shotgun type house that's in the background, and that's in the Dallas area, right, Helen?
In the Dallas area.
Okay.
And of course they were farmers.
They were farmers, okay. Were both of your grandparents farmers?
No.
They were not. What did your other set of grandparents do for a living?
My grandparents owned a paint, well, they moved from this area and went to Tyler, and when I knew them, they owned a paint store in Tyler.
All right, is that the Dreckshaws or the
Hergesheimers. Hergesheimers.
Hergesheimers, okay, the Hergesheimers. And they do you have folks then in and around the Tyler area where they had their paint store?
I do not. Most of Mother's family is dead.
I see. All right. Now, when your grandparents moved to the Dallas area, tell me about your parents. Give me their full names and maybe how your mother and father met.
Well, my mother actually died when she was 10 years old, and she came to live with John Bensel out at Wheatland, and then they moved to Grand Prairie. And I'm sorry, I've lost my track of mind.
That's
here.
all right. Your mother came to live in the Grand Prairie area with the Vensels.
With the Vensels, and they raised her, and they have a farm out at Florence Hill. And so she was 10 years old when they took her. And that was she was born in 88, so that means that they came here about 1900, or 1888 or 1900 and so forth.
And when she grew up in that area, where did she go to school?
She went to school at Florence Hill.
Oh, I believe we have an old Florence Hill photograph where your mother is in that.
Yes, my mother is in this old picture, and we're not sure whether it's the old Florence Hill School or the Hogwaller School.
Would you point your finger to your mother, and as the camera picks that up, maybe they can get where her picture is on that?
It's right here.
Wonderful. Are there any other Grand Prairians that live in and around the area that you could point out in that?
There is one, which is Laura or Laura Poole. Now, I don't remember which one it is.
And
but
they were twins?
They were twins, but it's one of them. And where the other one is, I'm sure she's in the picture, but I don't know where it is.
And wouldn't that be splendid if this picture just happened to be the old Hogwaller School, because we've been searching for one of those pictures, and maybe we can trace this one back and find out whether it was the very first Florence Hill School that was that burned. I believe there was one that burned, and possibly this is it, or the Hogwaller. And I believe the Hogwaller School was also the church building.
It was.
They used them interchangeably. Okay, now we have your mother to about 10 years old out at Florence Hill and going to school, and as she grew up, she continued to go to Florence Hill to
She
school?
went to Florence Hill, and then she went to Grand Prairie High School and rode horseback.
She rode horseback to school.
And that's about 7 miles is what it amounted to there.
And they called her Kate, right?
They called her Kate.
Okay. Well, did you give us her full maiden name? I don't believe you gave her that for the record. Would you tell us her full maiden name?
Catherine Louisa Hergesheimer.
Catherine Louisa. How wonderful.
Hergesheimer.
That is beautiful. All right, now that we've gotten her into high school, tell us how she met Mr. George August Dregshaw.
Well, Mr. and Ms. Vinsel had a cousin that lived with them and married my daddy's sister, and she met him at their wedding. And so then it wasn't too long until they
had a courtship, and then they married.
Then they married.
All right, now is this the photograph that you have there of your parents?
This is my mother and daddy.
And this is her wedding dress?
This is her wedding dress, and I think they married February the 23rd, 1913.
All right, now I believe there's a history to that wedding dress also. I believe that has been passed on down into the family, and it's now with the family or the historical organization, whichever comes first.
Wherever we find it. It's right at present, we can't locate it, otherwise we would have had it here this afternoon.
Oh, that is wonderful, and it's wonderful that you have this old photograph of them, and especially in this very splendid wedding dress. I know that'll be something wonderful. All right, now tell me about your parents. After they married, what did your dad do for a living?
My daddy was a farmer.
Your daddy was a farmer also. Did your mother work out of the home, or
No,
did
she
was a
worked
farmer's
in-
wife?
She was a farmer's wife.
All right, now
right.
tell me about your immediate family. How many children did they have, and how do you fall in line in the number of children?
I have 2 brothers and 1 sister. I have 1 brother that is older than I am.
Give us his name.
Lloyd August Dregshaw.
Wonderful.
And then I have a brother that is younger than I am. His name is Harold Vinsel Dregshaw.
All right, now Harold still lives in Grand Prairie.
In Grand Prairie.
All right, now tell us where Harold lives in Grand Prairie, and maybe where he works, because I know that there's many that may watch our program that want to know about Harold.
Well, he lives on Hill Street in Grand Prairie. And he bought the house from Sylvia Small, which is an older Grand Prairian too. I don't know whether she still lives here in Grand Prairie or not, but that's where he bought the house. And he lives at the First City, he works at the First City National Bank.
Wonderful. All right, and then you have a sister, I believe. We'd like to name drop your sister.
Her name is Dorothy Faye Dregshaw, and she got her degree from the University of Texas. And there was 2 schools available, and one was in West Columbia and one was in Beaumont. So she went to West Columbia and hasn't been back.
And still lives in
and
that area.
still lives in that area.
That is wonderful. Well, now that was a splendid family of 4. And as you grew up in the Florence Hill area, where did you go to school, Helen?
I went to school at Florence Hill, and I graduated at the elementary school at Florence Hill, because at that time you graduated from the elementary school, the 7th grade.
All right, tell us the principal's name and maybe some of the
W.T.
teachers.
Bradford.
W.T. Bradford was your principal. Who were some of your teachers?
Miss Bradford was my teacher,
All right.
and Miss Spillman was my teacher, and two Miss Chapmans. I had 2 Miss Chapmans, and that's the extent
That was
of
the
my
faculty.
That was my teachers all through the year. My first teacher's name was Chapman.
All right. Now, I'd like for you to hold up the little picture that's in the round tin-type looking container. And how old were you, Helen, when that picture was made?
I really imagine I was about 18 months old, or maybe 2 years old in that. Because about that time we had a heater in the stove, in the what we called in the heater room, and I got behind it and burned my hand, and that's the reason I'm holding my hand the way that I am there.
In that
is because I went behind the heater and the wall, and I got stuck.
All right. Now, after you finished elementary at Florence Hill, then how did you get to school in Grand Prairie, Texas?
Oh, I rode the bus, and Mr. Crouch.
Mr. Crouch.
Mr. Grinny Crouch is what we called him, and I don't even know what his first name is. But anyway, it's Marie's Crouch's daddy, or Marie Crouch Baker's daddy is who it is. And he drove the bus.
And he was always smiling.
He
so
was always smiling, and he was a very fine man. We all loved him.
And when you went to Grand Prairie, what was your graduating class year of Grand Prairie High School?
1938, and a lot of them would like to know that we had 33 in our graduating class that year. And I don't know what they have now, but anyway, that's come a long way since
All
I
right,
graduated.
now in your graduating class, are there those in Grand Prairie that still live in this area that were in your class?
There's a few.
Could you name drop any of them?
Joe Campbell, and Bob Shanks, and
Mr. Glenn?
Elbert
Elbert
Glenn
Glenn?
wasn't in my class.
He was not in your class,
But he
okay.
still lives here. He's in my scrapbook here playing football, but he wasn't
right.
in my Sunday school class. I mean,
In your class?
in my class.
Graduating class. Well, who was the principal when you were at school? Was that Mr. Roberts?
L.A. Roberts was the superintendent.
The superintendent?
No, he was the principal when I went to school there.
Okay.
Oh, Ruthie, this has been so long ago, and I hadn't thought about these things until I'm just not remembering them.
All right, now, after you got out of school, where did you and your family attend church?
At the First United Methodist Church in Grand Prairie now. But whenever I was growing up, we had what we called an ecumenical church. It was supervised by the Methodist Church, but we had our church in the Florence Hill school. And that's where I went to church.
Do you remember any of the leaders, the preacher, or anyone at that ecumenical church?
Most of the leaders, one of them was Jerry Price, which lived out at Florence Hill. And then we had Mr. and Mrs. N.P. King. Now, Miss King, as far as I know, is still living and lives in Arlington. And they were really the leaders of the church at that particular
Well,
time.
who do you remember as some of the influential families out in the Florence Hill area?
Well, the Pools and the Rapes and the Mausers. And I believe that's about what
That's
I
a
can
goodly
think
number, isn't it?
of. That's what I can think of
All right,
now.
now, when you graduated from high school, then what did you do with your life?
Well, I went to work for the Texas Employment Commission, and I worked there for about 30 years. And then during that period of time, I quit the Texas Employment Commission and went to work for Six Flags and was the worked in the personnel office interviewing the boys and girls that went to work at Six Flags. And then they laid me off. And then I came back to work for Texas Employment Commission. And in '82, I retired.
All right, now, how and when did you meet this young man that you married many long years ago?
Well, I suppose we can say that we met in the church because we had, at that particular time, we had a young business people's class. And I was a Sunday school teacher. And every time they'd have a social or anything, they invited me to the socials because I was considered that group, you know, in that group. And so through the church, I met him.
And how did Lester get to Grand Prairie, Texas? Lester, tell us how you got to Grand Prairie.
Well, I had a sister that came back to Fort Worth, and she left her 2 boys with her mother. And during the Easter vacation, she decided she wanted them, so I drove them from California to Fort Worth and fooling around there. I ran out of money, so I had to go to work. So Transfault was hiring at that time, so I hired into Transfault, and I've been here ever since.
And what was your trade working at the Transfault? What did you do with your hands or for a living?
I was a milling machine operator till I became a lead man in the same department, production mills.
And you all married, and I know you want to tell us about your lovely daughter, Helen.
Yes, we have been blessed with a lovely daughter, Janet Lynn. And I call her Janet Lynn, and she says her name is Janet until I get a little provoked with her, and then I say Janet Lynn.
Then it is Janet Lynn. And where does she live, Helen?
She lives in Arlington at the
She lives
present.
in Arlington.
And she's engaged to be married the 17th of October.
And does she work for a living?
She works in Dallas, and Austin, well, I didn't know whether we were supposed to name
That's
the place.
fine.
Austin Industries, and she is cash control manager, and she takes care of the pensions and salaries and so forth of the executives of the company.
That's wonderful. All right. Now, Helen, we have lots and lots of good memorabilia here. You have some things that belong to your father and mother and grandparents. If you'll let Lester hold the scrapbook, we're going to try to get back to this scrapbook if we can, because there's a lot of good stuff in that one. Would you tell us about this that belonged to your father and do a little explanation about that?
This is the dress that my daddy was baptized in, and he was born in March the 15th of 1883. So this makes this dress be about 103 years old.
All right.
But that's the baptismal dress.
And where was he baptized in this dress? Do you know that?
No, I don't.
You don't know that? Okay. All right, and this is an unusual piece of equipment that a lot of us remember from the Dark Ages, and a lot of them wouldn't recognize now. Tell us what that is.
This little piece right here is what they call a naval band. And
The newborn babies had that, didn't they?
this is what they put over the newborn babies over their navel card so that it would grow real pretty.
Wonderful. All right, then you also have some more personal items here that they look like a chemise or a camisole.
Well, this is a camisole.
All right. Would you tell us about those and to whom those belong?
This belonged to my grandmother,
Isn't that lovely?
and
Look-
her name was Alice Williams Vinsel.
All right.
And now I looked out because I had 3 grandmothers.
Isn't that great? Because one raised you and then you had 2 that were your very own.
And this is what they call a slip.
That's a petticoat, isn't it?
Petticoat. Yeah, you're right. A petticoat is
And
right.
it's embroidered so beautifully at the bottom.
At
That
the
is
bottom,
lovely. Yes. All right, now, these are 2 things that we know that you're going to want to talk about.
Now this is a little bonnet that I wore when I was, I'd say anywhere from 2 years to 4 years old and so forth there. My mother didn't want her little blonde-headed or her little white-headed girl. It was a real fair complexion
Yes.
to get blistered and burned, because back in those days you didn't brown like you do these days.
Oh, yes.
And this is my great-grandmother, and it's, oh, I would say about 100 years old.
And what is that?
This is the bonnet.
Well, would you open that bonnet up so they can see? Oh, and it has some kind of stays in it.
Oh, yeah, it has staves in the, I don't know whether you can see that or not, but I think you can.
Are they cardboard?
They're
or-
cardboard, And because every time you wash these, you had to take the staves out.
Uh-huh. And that helped hold the brim of it out.
So that you could see,
Okay. Now, Helen, how about this lovely quilt that's before us right here? Can you tell us a little bit about that without picking it up all
Yes,
the
my
way?
great-grandmother quilted that, and it's what they call an H quilt, so that's the reason they gave it to me, because my name is Helen.
All right.
And she quilted it, and
Well, it's a
made the
very
quilt,
unusual pattern, isn't it? An H quilt.
that's what it's called, an H quilt.
And which one of your grandmothers did this work?
This was the one that raised my mother, her mother.
Her mother.
Actually, as far as being my grandmother, you know,
She was not a blood grandmother?
blood grandmother, but she still was my grandmother.
All right, now how about these beautiful clothes that you have on the side that you have on loan to the Historical Commission?
This right here is just a plain jacket or a blouse that my Parthena Williams, these belong to Parthena Williams, which is my great-grandmother.
All right, and those are so beautifully done, and look at all of the puff sleeves and the lovely things on the sleeves. Isn't that exciting? Tell us about
And
the
you
neck.
can tell, and this is another one, and you can tell that she was a tall, slender lady, because these are tiny
Yes, they
garments.
are. And that's black taffeta, I believe.
It is, and they're all about 100 years old.
Oh, right, and the striped blouse, that is a very unusual and intriguing one. Would you talk about that?
Well, all of these are Parthena Williams, and they are all about 100 years old. And these just go over the camisole.
Yes, that is very, very exciting. And where can these be seen at the Historical Commission at the Copeland home?
At the Copeland home, And this is a skirt that she had, that she wore these different blouses with.
Helen, can you imagine wearing that in the hot summer? All of these blacks and taffetas, and I'm sure that they did. And that one is lined.
I want you to look at the lining. Oh, you didn't? You couldn't see through their dresses.
They lined them.
They lined them, And so, and she wore this the year round. One of those pictures that I brought, she had one of these on. I don't know whether it's in there or not, but anyway, she had one of those dresses on when she had with Lloyd.
All right. Now, here are two family pictures that I know you'll want to hold up and tell us who they are.
Well, this is my older brother, Lloyd, and it's, I wanted you to see what little boys wore
Aren't they
at that
precious?
particular time. And this is my younger brother and me, and you can see what they wore there. And you can see that back in those days, my hair was just as white as it is now.
It is now. All right, now, Helen, this is another that I know that you'd like to hold up. I believe that is the Florence Hill School. Not
this is
exactly as it is now, but it's the brick building, isn't
This is the Florence Hill School that burned. Now, I went to this school. This picture happened to be my brother's, Lloyd's picture. And he's in that picture. And who the others are, I don't know, because they didn't write the names of them.
But that is at the Florence
That
Hill
is
site,
the old Florence Hill School.
prior to the one that is there now, the brick one that is there now.
Now, this one burned down, and then they built the new one there. But this was the old one. It was a two-story building.
Two-story, red brick.
Red
apparently.
brick, and we had stoves that you burn coal with. That's the
All
way the
right.
heating was.
Now, I'd like for you to hold up both of these pictures at the same time, if you can, and show the Grand Prairie High School class and maybe point out some of the people that are in those two photographs.
Well, now this is the basketball group, Now, this is me, and this is our coach. Now, I was trying to find the ones that, now Martha Sue Stubbs lives in Dallas, and Mary Jean Douthit lives here in Grand Prairie.
And works for Republic Bank.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
And these others now, I don't know where they live. I
All
don't
right,
believe
now
they
tell
live
me
in
about
Hill.
your basketball picture.
Well, this is what I'm talking about, it's basketball.
Who was your
picture.
coach at that time?
Mr. Young.
Mr. Young. Would you hold that up so they can get a close-up maybe of Mr. Young and the basketball girls in 1938?
1938, uh-huh.
That's very exciting. And what class picture is that you're
Now,
holding?
this is the graduating class, 1938. 38.
Would you hold that one up then so we can get a shot of that? Well, Helen, we've had a very exciting time talking today. We have one more minute. Hasn't it passed quickly?
It sure has,
Well, we'd like for you to take this book and maybe read some of the names that are in your memorabilia there so people will know that you have a record of some of the things that happened to you at Grand Prairie High School. Who was the coach that's on the first page?
Coach Neely is the one, and Bobby Shanks, and Elbert Glenn, and Lamarson Breckenridge lives at Maybank, which is not very far away, and these others don't live here in Grand Prairie.
And then you have this book filled with old photographs and memorabilia about Grand Prairie High School.
1938, uh-huh.
All right.
And I have the different ones that have signed it and so forth.
Well, we appreciate both of you all coming to help bring back the memories, and we want to say thanks for the memories that you all have had to add to our list of historical happenings in Grand Prairie, Texas. And we hope that y'all will live here many more long, prosperous years. And we thank you for being such good citizens of Grand Prairie and for coming every Tuesday morning at 6:15 to the prayer breakfast. Y'all are very splendid, splendid citizens.
We
And
enjoy
this
it.
is Ruthie Jackson reminding you that history is as we live and do.